And welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to a bonus podcast episode. I'm Harrison Reno. Right alongside me is, as always, Dan Kiley. Dan, how's it going on this Wednesday evening? Weird day to be saying we are live.
Yeah, hey, we're back. Listen, we can't control the news flow when something happens, especially when Harrison has such an impassioned rant and then something breaks the following day. We have to come back and give you a reaction to it.
Absolutely. And if you are living under a rock or did not see the news break yesterday, Sports Illustrated's Ross Dellinger dropped the bombshell Tuesday evening that the NCAA is potentially looking like they're about to act. And when we say that, they're looking like they're going to act on all these recent NIL deals. What Dan was talking about, I mean, we gave a rant yesterday. Both of us had a long conversation about how the NCAA and college football specifically is slowly but surely turning into a pay-for-play scheme. Or, as I like to call it, the college football version of NBA free agency. So, Ross Dellinger reported yesterday, and I quote, "University administrators, part of a task force to review NIL, are finalizing additional guidelines that are expected to clarify that boosters and booster-led collectives are prohibited from involvement in recruiting. Multiple sources tell Sports Illustrated." Dan, holy crap, we may get some actual guidelines from the NCAA. They actually are doing something for once and stepping up.
Thank goodness that somebody's doing something, and I don't give Mike Emmert any credit for anything because I just think he's, like I said Monday, the epitome of weak leadership. But they have formed a committee, and if you read the article that was written, that this could go in effect as early as next week. They think they could push this through in a week's time, which is incredible if you think about it, how quickly that could happen. They presented it to a group of coaches and administrators, and it was, I want to say it was like 100-something pages long or whatever, outlining what they can and can't do. But I mean, your impassioned speech was perfect, and I am just. And I was so frustrated listening to you talk because I didn't think that they were going to do anything, one. And two, I didn't know how you could possibly rail this in because it just got so out of control. So I when I saw that come out, I was extremely happy. And I was actually really happy for you because I saw and I could feel how angry this was making you and how frustrated you were. And I was just as frustrated. So thank God somebody's trying to do something.
You know, I thought about trying to get the clip and put it in here so we can show it at the beginning of the show to remind people what we're talking about. I mean, what really dropped the mic for me was when you came in and really mentioned, like, what are these schools getting when their top star leaves? I mean, or, you know, when their head coach leaves. USC, I mean, what did OU get? Yeah, they got a buyout, but what is Pittsburgh going to get when Jordan Addison leaves and eventually enters the portal and picks his destination? I mean, today, speaking of Addison, there's reports now that he's working out in California with Bryce Young. I mean, just 2 days ago, you know, when I was thinking of the Bama offense, I was thinking about the excitement from a Georgia perspective of facing a Bama offense that doesn't already have a known elite product at receiver. I mean, they could get Jordan Addison and basically steal him from USC.
And that's basically exactly what they did. My wife, who does not listen to anything that we do, and she could care less about what we do, but she asked me why we were having another podcast. And I brought up what we talked about on Monday and how basically, loosely speaking, how USC basically got up in his DMs, was like, hey, listen, we'll pay you $3 million to come out here to leave Pittsburgh. And her reaction was, how is that not illegal? She's like, she couldn't believe it. She was blown away. She thought I was making it up. She said, $3 million to go play high school or college football? And I was like, yeah, not only that, he's enrolled in another school and they're trying to get him to leave his school to come across the country and play for them. And they're offering him $3 million. And her reaction was, how is that not illegal? She's like, oh my God. And so when you have even a non-sports fan who could care less about any of it to react that way, I mean, I think that says it all, does it not?
I mean, and it's not the only one. What's even more crazy is I think this news broke either Tuesday or late Monday night after we, went live, that Texas star wideout Xavier Worthy was offered 6 figures to transfer away from Texas. We're talking about a player that, I mean, up until last night, up until the other night, there was no word of even entering the transfer portal. No even thought. This was brought into existence about the thought of Xavier Worthy entering the portal because news broke that someone offered him to get into the portal for 6 figures. I mean, we're talking about something that could have been similar to what Pat Darnuzzi may suspect USC of doing with Addison, trying to get a guy out into the transfer portal. I mean, absolutely ridiculous, and offering him money to do it.
It is absolutely insane, and you're right. One of the emphases in the article and in the new collective or whatever the guidelines that they're putting out is their biggest fear was that boosters were going to find a way to get involved, and that's exactly what's happened. Is boosters are involved, and they are directly involved, and they are recruiting players to schools. That was never supposed to happen. So that was part of the emphasis for this, is to get that out of the way. The other issue is that there's a handful of schools who have been blatant about what they're doing, and those schools have been investigated on the periphery, and they are the emphasis for all of this. There's a handful of schools, and they didn't list the schools, but Miami is one of them. USC is another one of them. Texas A&M, and that bullshit they just pulled in this last signing. I don't care what Jimbo says. I'm right here. Whatever. Listen, there's a handful of people who are doing this the wrong way. And I was going to read something off of this, and I hope it's a little bit entertaining, but the donor who has drawn the most scrutiny is John Ruiz, a lawyer in Miami whose payroll includes more than 100 Hurricane athletes across various sports. He is expected to spend $10 million this year to South Florida players to endorse his company, Life Wallet, a healthcare application, and a cigarette racing boat team. 10 days ago, Ruiz used his own Twitter account to announce that Miami just received a commitment. All right, he used his own personal Twitter account to announce a signing. He shouldn't be announcing anything, for one, okay? So the guy who they signed, he just signed to a $400,000 a year deal. It says, this is John Ruiz talking. We feel our platform is the only one in the country that would truly be resilient to any attack by the NCAA. We have our quid pro quo. The payments are made electronically every 2 weeks. I am running it like a well-oiled machine. This guy doesn't, I mean, he just took his nuts out and put them on the table and was like, what's up, baby? You can't, he's a lawyer. He's covering his ass. Part of the language as it exists right now is there has to be a quick pro quo to where you have to give something to get something. And it's just, I mean, the guy is spending $10 million a year. He's a booster. Boosters aren't supposed to be involved. I mean, this couldn't have come quick enough. And I'm so over it.
I mean, what are they going to, I mean, now that the rules are coming out and the new bylaws, well, not new bylaws, these have been in place for, I mean, over 4 decades? Ever since the NCAA has existed, one of the biggest rules is, hey, if you're a booster, the only thing you're allowed to do is, and he says it, Dellinger says in the article, boosters are an arm of the athletic department. They are a fundraising arm. That is how the athletic department gets money to do plan A, plan B, to fund this and fund that. They are not supposed to be talking anywhere near high school prospects. Better yet, transfer portal prospects. I mean, that's not their job. That's above their pay grade. We're talking about, high-paid orthodontists, lawyers. I mean, just all these jobs. And now they're taking all their money. And to me, I was talking to someone who, to my knowledge, doesn't watch college football. And they wanted to know, how is that not money laundering? Giving these money to an 18, 21-year-old and say, hey, come to my school. And it's an absurd amount of money. And Gucci Gook says in the comments, paying $10 million to watch Miami go 8-4. That's one of the best comments I've seen.
You know what, though? Gucci makes a great point, because that was my point on Monday. All these guys, all these boosters are anteing up the money. They're doing that, right? But what happens when these kids suck and the team doesn't perform? Is, like I said on Monday, rich people don't get rich by giving money away. So at some point, they want a return on their investment. Now, who's to pay for that? Well, there's a lot that we don't know already, and we haven't seen this thing flesh all the way out. Okay. And like we even talked about on Monday, we haven't seen any of these guys get drafted. Does it affect their draft status? Or these NFL teams, are they looking at them like, maybe that's not a guy I want who's all about the, like Kayvon Thibodeau, there was question and there was the perception that he was going to fall in the draft because they felt like he cared more about money than he did about football. Well, it only takes one team to fall in love with you, so it didn't really hurt him in the long run. But a lot of these kids who got their hand out looking for the bigger, better deal all the time, I don't know how that's going to affect their long-term future in the NFL, if at all. Maybe the NFL doesn't care at all. But I mean, the overall point is that, though, like, these people want to return on their investment, and you're giving money to unknown quantities. That's great. You have 5 stars, but I mean,
it don't mean crap when you go to college or
right?
you step on in between those numbers. It don't mean anything. I mean, a great example of, stars not mattering. I mean, you look at some of Georgia's receivers who have now transferred away, or I saw yesterday, almost all of the receivers that Tom Herman recruited at Texas in his time, I believe it was in that 2020 class, 2020 or 2019, they've all transferred. Majority of them. Gone. Just gone. I mean, once you step in between those lines, whether you're George Pickens, Matt Landers, anyone, if you're a 5-star, once you step in between those lines, do you think Sauce Gardner, who's lining up against you, cares what you were in high school? No.
What was Sauce Gardner? What was Sauce Gardner coming out of high school? I bet he was a 2 or 3-star.
Yeah.
Right? He wasn't anybody.
I mean, Cincinnati just put 9 players in the draft. We're talking about a non-Power 5 program as of right now. Put 9 players in the draft. And you go look at a quote-unquote blue blood, Texas, put 0. 0. And Texas is recruiting 10 times the amount of 4 and 5 stars than Cincinnati is.
Jonathan, the battle of Miami and Texas. Who's back first? Well, hey, listen, Texas has already told you they're back, right? They're back to being shit.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise if this was allowed to keep going. I mean, USC's already getting in there. It's already, showing, hey, I got all sorts of money and I'm going to use it to get some of the best players in the country. I mean, they've already tampered with half of OU's roster at this point.
USC, like I'll say it again, and I've said it 4 or 5 times already, USC is extremely dangerous because they have things that other schools can't offer to begin with. They have the lifestyle out in LA, not necessarily something that I would want to do, but there are a lot of kids who are attracted to that type of lifestyle, the rich and the famous out in LA and all that attention. They have the scenery, they have the weather, they have good facilities, and then they have an enormous alumni that give money like nobody's business. Business has not been good at USC here recently, but they have proven that when they have it going well, it goes extremely well. And then add on top of that, now you can just straight up buy people. Man, that's it. I mean, USC is the most dangerous team in the country if this is allowed to continue the way it's going right now. And you come at me with any take you want to. That's a fact, Jack. Because if you can pay players, USC has things that other schools don't, and they have the money. They're extremely dangerous. So this has to get under control, or a team like that is going to just pillage the NCAA.
I mean, now that the NCAA is acting, does the NCAA go after? I mean, we both doubted on the show Monday that we didn't think the NCAA would act, or if they did, it wouldn't turn out well for them. I mean, do we have the confidence to say that, hey, okay, these new guidelines are coming out. Is the NCAA gonna give a random act of forgiveness and say, all right, now that they're out, the rules start now. So if you violated it, in the days before this, we're not going after you, or they're gonna say, screw that, you already violated the existing bylaws, so we're coming after your ass. USC, Tennessee, allegedly.
Well, I don't think that NCAA is going to go after anybody. I think that they're trying to put this out there, hoping that everybody will follow along. we already said the NCAA is a governing body. It doesn't actually have any legal recourse on anything. If you look at every single scandal that's ever gone on to be pursued, it gets pursued by the authorities. It doesn't get pursued by the NCAA. So I don't really know how this is going to play out. I think it's a great gesture, if you will, that they're willing to try to do this. But, as I quoted Jay Billis on Monday's show, who's an attorney, he said the NCAA doesn't want to act on anything because they know they're going to lose in court. Every time that they've gone to court, they've lost. That's why the NIL deal started, was because they lost in court. And they're scared to death they're going to lose in court again. And then they're going to start getting sued. They're losing cases now. They're afraid that they're going to start getting sued. And that's the bigger issue. I don't know how this is going to be governed. To your question, are they going to retroactively go get somebody? No way in hell. I know they won't try that. But I believe it's going to be from this point forward. This is the hallway. Stay in it. And I'm very interested to see who plays within the lines and who doesn't. And if anybody is caught playing outside the lines, what is the recourse? I find it very difficult to believe that there's going to be a recourse to our satisfaction, to be honest.
Speaking about the NCAA going after people, because, right now, USC doesn't have, there's a lot of there's a huge name brand in USC right there, and a lot of past history of greatness. Well, the NCAA did show, in this past week that they are going after somebody. May not be a program with much leverage right now, not a lot of wins. They did put some sanctions on Nebraska for apparently Nebraska was holding off-campus workouts during the COVID dead period when no workouts were supposed to be permitted. And I'm pretty sure they even had, if I remember correctly, they even had coaches going down to high schools to, I don't know, recruit people, or whether they were actively recruiting these kids, or they were going down to scout them out when they obviously weren't supposed to. And now Scott Foster, who's already on the hot seat down there in Nebraska, it has a show cause order. A show cause order. Can't recruit anybody unless I think the only loophole in that is he's only allowed to recruit kids when they're on campus.
Well, they are putting sanctions in for different things, but those rules were already in place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those recruiting rules were already in place, so they had a leg to stand on. With this NIL stuff, they just opened it up and said, do whatever the hell you want. And so it was wrong to begin with. I don't think anybody there are a lot of people that disagree with that. A lot of people think the college kids should be able to do whatever they want, whenever they want, make money however they want, do whatever they want. It doesn't matter. There are just some people who have never played, to be completely honest. And I think that has a lot to do with the way that I feel personally. It's not that I didn't get anything, because I wouldn't have gotten any NIL stuff. Nobody would have paid me anything. But it's just the fact that I think as college football fans, we hold college football to a certain standard and we want it a certain way. And a lot of people don't like that, but that's why people who love college football typically don't like the NFL, and people who love the NFL typically don't like college. It's just two different complete worlds, and they've kind of merged into one, and that's not the way it was supposed to be. But the cat's out of the bag now, and you can't get them in.
And to quote, the famous Batman line that has been put in GIF form in the Discord, some men just want to see the world burn. And that's what I think when you see some of these USC fans coming out and complaining about everyone hopping on their case when, there's no curtain with what USC's doing. They didn't call for the curtains. They're doing it in plain sight. As our friend Brooks Austin said, patreon.com/Brooks Austin, the one free shout out that we have going on for weeks now. The game's been crooked, and, take that as you will, read between the lines. Now everyone's seeing it. It's in front of your eyes. It has been legalized, but now the NCAA wants to say, okay, we're going to come in here and make sure this, we're going to put the bylaws down. And like Dan said, we're going to hope you follow them, because, what is the NCAA going to do if you don't? What are they going to do?
No, you said something about money laundering earlier. That's not the right term to use because none of it is money laundering. Money laundering is funneling money through a real business to make it come out, dirty money come out good money. But it's just straight up paying people to come to your school. I don't know. There's not really a term for that. It's just buying talent. And like SMU is pissed off right now. They're like, hold on, time out. We started this game a long time ago. You gave us a death sentence and it took us 20 years to recover from it.
They still ain't recovered.
No, and that's the other thing too, is that the NCAA is never going to give the death penalty away because of what it did to SMU. It destroyed the school. So the death penalty will never come back. But something has to be done. Somebody has to be made an example of. John Ruiz, the lawyer from South Florida in Miami, he knows they're coming for them. He knows they've been sniffing around. He's already got the preemptive strike out there talking about, I have all my ducks in a row. I have paperwork, emails, signed contracts, and proof of my quid pro quo to back up everything that I've done. He knows that they're going to come for them. The guys down at Texas A&M, we haven't really actually heard a whole lot about those people. We heard about all the stuff that they were going to do, and we saw the class that they were able to get, but we don't know any names. But when you have a name like with John Ruiz, when you're out there and facing the public, you have to have your ducks in a row because you're a target. The guys at USC, they have so much money out there and it's coming from so many different places. It's hard, but they got Reggie Bush and they were able to track that down. And those guys were really good at what they do. And it just took, I believe it was his mom or his dad. One of them did something stupid as hell. And that's how the whole thing got rolling. But Harrison, I don't know. I'm so happy that they're going to try to do something. I just don't think it's going to have the result that we want.
And going back to, looking over the article and the show notes that we put briefly together, it said this: according to the document, schools that do not control their donor spending could be found to have violated NCAA rules and will be sanctioned. The NCAA enforcement staff have made inquiries only into a small handful of programs so far, but the guidelines could spark deeper investigations into improper inducements tied to NIL payments. That is either they're shooting blanks or they're shooting shots. That's going to be the only two outcomes you get out of this. I mean, they say right there, schools that do not control their donor spending could be found to have violated NCAA rules. That sounds like, hey, this is your warning. We're coming after you. But, I mean, like Dan's pointed out time and time again, I mean, these guys have a paper spine. There is no standing up straight. Because, by God, if they try and straighten up, it's just going to go all the way back down. They're just going to collapse. And I don't know. I mean, the NCAA is going to be going through a major overhaul. We talked about it Monday. Mark Emmert, NCAA president, stepping down in June of 2023. I don't see the dude just overhauling everything on the way out the door. I mean, if he wanted to, he could because, hey, what are they going to do to him? He's already resigned. They can't fire him.
No.
What's the worst that can happen? So why not raise some hell on your way out the door?
Because he's a spineless coward. That's the reason he wouldn't do it. The other thing, too, is that, when the NIL first came out, the people I thought of was, I want to say his name was Michael Bloom, and I could be wrong, but he was like a kick returner for Colorado. And he was also a world-class downhill skier for an Olympic team. And he was making money off of endorsements. So they said he was ineligible for college football. So that was one of the things that sparked it. There's a guy, I want to say his name is like Destroying Videos or something like that. He's on YouTube, and he was a player at UCF, and they made him academically ineligible. They told him he either had to give up his YouTube page or he couldn't play college football. It was one or the other. You play college football. He was making like $3 or $4 million a year off of his YouTube page. He's like, kick rocks. So whenever this NIL deal came up, the first thing that I thought of was a lot of these kids are going to start their own YouTube and all that stuff. That doesn't seem to be happening at all. Most of it is just advertisements for these local businesses, which is fine, but the money is just out of control. The other thing that I thought would start happening, and I've seen this brought up on Twitter. I saw a little bit of it on NBA on TNT, is a lot of these guys are starting their own podcast like we have, or like Jonathan has, or anything like that, and Jeremiah. So they're starting their own podcast. Well, a lot of these athletes, like Draymond Green in particular, will not talk to the media anymore. So now he goes on to his podcast to give his own post-game comments or game thoughts. So he's alienating that. So I wondered if that would be part of it. But I think coaches have the ability to control that a little bit. But one thing that really struck me, and I was talking to you a little bit, I wanted to find maybe anybody on Twitter has it. A couple days ago, it might have been yesterday, there was a list of the top 10 high school athletes NIL deals. There are high school athletes with NIL deals. Wrap your brain around that. The one name that was not on there was Mikey Williams. And if you know anything about the AAU scene and all that stuff, Mikey Williams, I think, is making about $5 million between all of his different endorsements and his social media presence. I know he makes a ton off of Instagram. My son follows him, and he's rolling around, and his mom has that Mercedes G-Wagon. He drives a Lamborghini, and this kid's in high school. He ain't done nothing. But so the top 10 list I had out there was Bronny James, number 1, makes $3.5 million a year. Egg on my face, I said I didn't think Archie Manning gave two shits about NIL stuff. He wanted to whatever. He's making $3.1 million. What in the hell? So there's a whole list of guys that are in high school. I didn't know most of the names on there. I'm sure other people do. But a couple of them were basketball players. But Bronny James making $3.5 million, Archie making 3.1. They're not even in college yet. So it can only go up from there, right?
I mean, if I remember correctly, I didn't think high school players were allowed to start getting their NIL deals as of right now. I thought they had to wait till they get in college. I don't know. I mean, I've seen projections for some of those guys, but I mean, they're making that type of money as it is right now with where they're at. I mean, it's even more crazy. I mean, shoot, let us get some of that money coming out of high school. With
Bronny James, it makes sense, though. His dad owns a production company, and his dad is LeBron freaking James. So the Bronny part doesn't shock me all that much because his dad has so many different connections to so many different people. He's been marketing his son since he could walk. So
he could dribble a basketball.
Yeah. And Bronny James, actually, other guys have gone way past him. I think he's like a 4-star now. He's in like the low 30s in this class. So he's not as dominant as people think he is. Mikey Williams is all hype, but there's guys that are just a lot better, and they just don't have the marketing arm. Like, the one thing that I will say about like Mikey Williams is the kid is brilliant. He markets the hell out of himself.
And I think that's just where everything's going is you got to know how to market yourself. The days of being able to post whatever you want on social media are over. People will find it. Anyone can find it. I mean, Twitter now, Twitter's had the feature where you can search someone's at and quote words and see if they've ever, used that word in a tweet. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. You can find anything. And, the people who market themselves best, I mean, the Stetson Bennett's of the world, the people who, may not use social media that much, who kind of stay off of it. I mean, you're going to see them getting some lucrative contracts because, I mean, who wouldn't want Stetson Bennett, the national championship winning quarterback, being an advertisement for their business? I mean, Dan just raised his hand. I mean, who wouldn't want Jordan Davis on a billboard driving, in downtown Atlanta? I mean, Dan mentioned it the other week. I mean, he saw the Jordan Davis billboard. What downtown Atlanta or near downtown Atlanta?
No, it was on my way to work. It was just one of the traffic lawyers, and it was in like the strong arms of Jordan Davis, and his arms were spread way out. It was hilarious.
I mean, guys, I know over the last few episodes when we talk NIL, what gets us upset is seeing clearly that the rules are being broken and that the game is going more and more towards towards a professional league. I'm just going to put it, straight up with y'all. We have no problem with college athletes making money. We are all for name, image, and likeness. I mean, it is a necessary evolvement in college sports. I mean, it should have been done years ago. I mean, I can only imagine the type of money the Zion Williamsons, the Vince Young, the Aaron Murrays of the world would have been making back in college. But where we draw the line is when you have boosters or people associated with universities using that money to bribe kids to go to their school. That is where we draw the line.
So I found this today. I was looking for the tweet that I was looking for, but this was last year's. So now keep in mind that this list is going to be completely different now because of all of these kids who are coming in and getting bought in to come to these schools. Their money is going to be out the yin yang. But this is the top. I won't read them all, but this is the top 25 student athletes last year in NIL deals. Number 1 was Bryce Young, 2 CJ Stroud, 3 Will Levis from Kentucky, Chris Olave 4, Jack Cohn. I don't even know who the Notre Dame quarterback. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Matt Corral, John Menchie was 7, Will Rogers is 8, Kenneth Walker III was 9, Mackenzie Milton was 10, which that's crazy. But Zamir White was 11, Tyler Goodson was 12, JT Daniels was 13. That was last year. And then all the way down towards the bottom, you got Kyle Hamilton, the safety out of Notre Dame. So, a high draft pick like that, and he's at the bottom of the list. But, I mean, so a lot of those names make sense, right? That their NIL deals should be high because they're highly visible players. And the majority of those guys didn't have the bag given to them. They were using local companies to do marketing. And that's what it was supposed to be, not the boosters. I don't have a problem with that. That list I just read, no problem with that. I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with these kids coming out of high school or getting bought out of other schools to transfer. That's the issue that I have. That list I just read, zero problem. They are using their celebrity and their platform to market themselves and get deals from local businesses. That's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, boosters, I don't care. I don't care what business you own. You financially donate. You financially support a university, and you do. And basically, I mean, I don't know if the universities, I would assume most universities are aware if you're going after some of their recruits. They may not ask you for your help, but, they're going to know. There is no school. And, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but there's no way that a school cannot control their donor spending. You should have the power to be able to stop someone from getting you in trouble. And if you can't, then they shouldn't be donating to you anyways.
They're going to get tagged with lack of institutional control. That's what it's going to be. And
I mean, you shouldn't be getting tagged for that. I mean, if these donors, if you can't control their spending, then they're not supporting your university. But I mean, Dan, real quick before we do let everybody go for the night, I want to get your thoughts because the Falcons have become a mainstay on this on the podcast over the last few weeks. I did see a mock draft the other week or this past week, and one of them had, I believe it was Jalen Carter going 3. And the last one was, I think they had the Falcons picking Will Levis, the quarterback out of Kentucky. And I immediately.
No. That was a bullshit mock draft. That I know you saw it because I tweeted it out too. I was like, I either this guy's a crackhead or he is mocking mock drafts, making fun of them because he had 5 straight quarterbacks going, and Anthony Richardson was one of them. So that's bullshit. I'm not going to even comment on that. That was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my entire life. The real mock draft that I saw was from PFF, and they had the Falcons taking Will Anderson at 2, and they had Jalen Carter going 3 to the Jets, and then they had Eric Gilbert going 5. So that's a real mock draft. This idiot had, you know what? I even have the damn picture on here because that's so ridiculous. This was his mock draft right here. He had CJ Stroud, Will Levis, Bryce Young, DJ Ungole, and Anthony Richardson going the top 5. with Will Anderson going 6. There's no way in hell Will Anderson goes 6 to anybody. And first of all those teams don't need well, maybe they do, but
who knows in a year's time.
Yeah, there's no way in hell that's going to happen. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I was just like, you've got to be kidding me.
And as I look out the window, a thunderstorm has started where I live, so that is wonderful. But I mean, to go off Dan's point, I mean, there ain't no way that many quarterbacks go. I mean, I don't even have a first. I mean, from what I saw last year, and it could change. Everything can change. DJ Ungale from Clemson did not play like a first-round draft pick. I mean, he would need a huge turnaround this year. Not saying it can't happen. Not saying it can't be done. It can be done. But him and Anthony Richardson, I mean, even Will Levis to an extent, those guys weren't playing like first-round draft picks last year.
No, the crazy part is a lot of these quarterbacks become extremely expendable, and they're moving around. And there's so many guys that are still hanging on. Like, look at this year's draft. There was really only 2 teams that needed a quarterback, the Falcons and the Steelers. Outside of those 2 teams, nobody really needed a quarterback. So that's why we didn't see quarterbacks go that high. Now, if you have a generational guy coming out like Trevor Lawrence was supposed to be, and I'm not saying he's not going to be, but that, Trevor Lawrence was no question number 1, right? Everybody knew that. So if you're a team picking that high in the draft, you don't pass up a generational guy, especially if you have a guy getting older or you have a guy who's okay. But to say that 5 or 6 straight quarterbacks are going to go in the NFL, that's the most ridiculous. It's never happened in the history of football.
And I don't see it happening for a long time unless we see a quarterback draft class that is absolutely stacked with Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady's. I don't see it happening. I mean, the 2 guys I see going in the first round right now, and we'll wrap it up, is Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. Now, if I had to pick one, and as of right now, and it would be based off of what I've watched and kind of historical thinking, I'm taking a flyer on Bryce Young. I know we've talked about before. I know he's small. There are questions about his size and all that, and what he can, and all that. But I mean, you compare some of the resumes of an Ohio State quarterback to some of the most recent Alabama quarterbacks. I'm taking the flyer on Bryce Young.
Well, you can't name one winning quarterback in NFL history that went to Ohio State. You know why? Because there isn't one.
That's a stat I did not know.
There's not one quarterback at the University of Ohio State with a winning record. And Ryan Day has a one-read system. That's why Justin Fields fits so well there. He's a one-read quarterback. And we saw him have struggles in the NFL. And CJ Stroud, I was like, oh man, CJ Stroud is amazing. And then somebody's like, no, go back and watch him. The guys are running wide open, and it's his first or second read every single time. He doesn't get to a third or fourth read. And that is the problem with the way they develop quarterbacks at Ohio State, has been for years. I don't know the reason that they've never had a successful quarterback. I don't know why that is. There's got to be more to it than that. Just luck of the draw, whatever. But yeah, and you said DJ, you couldn't be a first round pick, man. I really think he could be. He hasn't played like it up to this point, but he has raw talent and size to be a first round draft pick, and somebody's going to be enamored with his raw talent. So I think he has a shot to get in there depending on how this year goes in the NFL, and if teams end up being quarterback needy. But that's the real thing, right? Unless you're a generational quarterback, why would you take one if you don't need one?
Yeah, and something that kind of makes me excited is you mentioned there were really only 2 teams that could have been looking at a quarterback this draft. I mean, wouldn't it be nice to have a whole league where every team has a franchise quarterback? I mean, talking about leveling the playing field, as some of the people like to say in college football now. I mean, that would be awesome, and it would suck for the upcoming quarterbacks. But I mean, a name I want to mention real quick as a guy that I think could rise up the board this year is Hendon Hooker. I mean, that guy played silently good at Tennessee last year. I think he threw 31 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. I heard today, 31-3 touchdown to interception ratio. That's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, and nobody's talking about him.
Well, it's multifaceted, right? Like, with all the quarterbacks that have come through college, how could you not find 32 good ones? Right? It's almost impossible to say that out loud and think about it. You got, 129 Division I football teams, something like that, and you can't find 32 quarterbacks over a 5-year period to fill up these rosters. And then on the flip side of that, 129 Division I teams. How the hell could you not have more than one first-round draft? I mean, this quarterback class was trash. It was terrible. There wasn't one quarterback drafted that everybody was excited about. Kenny Pickett has the smallest hands ever. He's doing exercises on tables and having people measure his hands out as he's spreading them on the table to make them wider so he could get drafted. You have it's insane. The quarterback play is so bad, but it's so good in certain areas and so bad in others. I couldn't believe that this class was that weak.
It's going to be interesting to watch. I mean, there's the whole debate around what Ryan Tannehill said about not having to mentor Malik Willis. We'll get into that on Monday potentially. But guys, this will wrap it up for our reaction episode. I don't know if I will count it as an episode of the Dawg Talk Podcast. I mean, it's going to go on the podcast feed. We'll see how we title it. But guys, that's going to wrap it up. We will be back Monday night, same time, same place. Guys, make sure to like, subscribe on YouTube. Hit us up in the comments down below if you're watching if you're watching after this is posted, after we were live. Hit us up. Also, if you're listening on podcast, make sure to rate us 5 stars and leave us a review, and you may get a chance to come on the show and give us a segment idea, or even come on and chop it up with us. Same offer for those in the comment section. Why not allow someone to come on and potentially give us a segment to talk about, kind of like a call-in type deal on the radio? Dan Kiley, tell them where they can find you.
You can find me at Dan Kiley 3 on Twitter, and just remember this: only you can help the podcast grow.
You can find me at TopDog_blogs on Twitter. Guys, we will see you back next Monday. I'm excited. Episode 41. Damn, we're getting up there.
Hold on, my daughter wants to make a surprise appearance. Come in here. Say hey. All right.
Guys, with that being said, guys, we'll see you back Monday night as Jeremiah Stutter adds in. Guys, make sure to go check out the Classics City Sports Podcast. They do a tremendous job. We delayed the podcast a little bit so they can finish up their show because we didn't want to go head-to-head with those guys because they are friends of the show.
Except they don't prop us up, and my daughter deserves more than 1 star, Jeremiah.
Guys, we will see you back next Monday. I'm Harrison Reno. That's Dan Kiley. See you next week.